Welcome to the CMO Spotlight. And today I have Bill Koleszar, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for the National Spine and Pain Center. Welcome, Bill.
Hello, Joe. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Bill, I wonder if you could just start by telling us a little bit about the National Spine and Pain Center. What's the company all about?
Sure, absolutely. Happy to. So National Spine and Pain Centers is the nation's largest network of interventional pain management physicians. So our doctors help people suffering from chronic pain. Often that's lower back pain, but it could be anything from migraines to tennis elbow to arthritic knees. We have 130 plus locations in 13 states. We'll see about 1.5 million patients this year, all suffering from some form of pain.
Wow. Okay. So, and that's kind of heavy, but also you all are obviously providing a service that's crucial to those that are dealing with these issues. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your role as Chief Marketing Officer. What does that mean? What does the team look like? You know, what's the structure of your job?
Absolutely. So I have to say, I feel so fortunate in that I have an amazing team, and I know a lot of, I'm sure a lot of CMOs say that, but I believe that a great team is comprised of a diverse set of people and diverse set of skills, and our team players and self-sacrificing leaders at all levels, whether you're a marketing specialist or a vice president of marketing, demonstrating leadership skills in different situations isn't precluded by your title or your tenure or anything else. So relative to the team, there's a core team of marketers that execute, digital campaigns, direct mail campaigns, SEO, and the like. I then have a role called Director of Patient Experience and Corporate Culture. And that is aligned with the idea, something I call branding by behavior. The idea that your company's brand is only as good as the last person from your organization to talk to somebody outside of your organization. Could be somebody in a call center, could be somebody in one of your retail locations or physical locations. And so he works to create a great employee experience as well as a great patient experience. We think they're inextricably connected. If your employees are happy, they help keep your customers happy. And then the last piece is the sales team. So I have a sales team that is typically calling on physicians, orthopedic surgeons, neurologists that send us patients who are in pain that they think we can help better than they can help in that particular patient's circumstance. And in the past, I've also had responsibility for our 90-person call center. Again, there's some synergy there with the patient experience and, of course, the investment of marketing dollars to drive response handled by the call center. And then the one last piece I have that I'll mention, because it's a little bit strange, is I have responsibility for our culture. And a big driver of that is training. So training is under my purview currently, as including our leadership development program for our top talent.
Great. Wow, it's pretty expansive when you think about all the pieces that roll into the marketing function at the company. It's amazing. So you've had a pretty interesting career path. I know you've had some stints in telecom and in banking and some other industries. You weren't just a medical industry marketer for your whole career. Tell us a little bit about your career path that led you to this role.
Yeah, sure. So as geeky as it sounds, my undergraduate experience, I was on a banking scholarship. So I actually believed that banking was the place for me. And I started out in banking. As you mentioned, I transitioned to telecommunications. And then I actually spent 7 years as an entrepreneur. Part of the time I was at a company called realestate.com. We grew that from a handful of people to 200 employees. Raised about $70 million in venture capital. And then I did a startup from complete scratch, 4 business partners and I, in the loyalty technology space. So basically we built a technology that helped run loyalty programs for large banks and retailers We ended up selling that to a private equity company in 2019 after a 9-year run. I was there for most of that time. But then I got back into banking, Royal Bank of Scotland, BBVA, a large Spanish bank. And then I had the opportunity to become the chief marketing officer of a company called American Family Care. It's essentially the largest urgent care network in the country. And that was a game changer for me. A really great opportunity to evolve and diversify my career, take on a leadership role in a substantive, C-suite role in a substantive organization. And it was a great experience, and that gave me the entree to become part of National Spine and Pain Centers. I was the first chief marketing officer at American Family Care, and I was the first chief marketing officer at National Spine and Pain Centers.
Great. So I'm curious if there was a piece of advice that you either wish you'd gotten, or maybe that you would give to somebody who's earlier in their marketing career.
Yeah. Gosh, there's so many. I think the one that I take that I've taken advantage of and I give to others often is, it's interesting. One of the other guests said the same thing, and I was almost dumbfounded, but I think it's so true. There are really only two things you can ever control, and particularly when I was in banking in 2008 when the Great Recession hit, and everyone was worried about their jobs. And as a recession looms, or in theory, a recession is being talked about, what I found is that there are only two things you can control. It's your attitude and your productivity. And I don't mean to sound trite or hackneyed or repeat anything other guests say, but I've lived that for a large part of my career, and I just think it can't be understated. So I'll be unoriginal.
No, but that's actually advice that probably even resonates with any parent, which is that when you have young kids, it's like, you can't control what Sarah or Johnny did to you. Yeah. You can only control how you respond to that. Yeah, right?
Exactly. It's interestingly, you say that back to how you respond. It's a classic Tony Robbins, training, if you will. For those that know Tony Robbins, he's a polarizing figure. Either people love him or hate him. I think he's a pretty brilliant guy who has a lot of great advice.
Yeah, for sure. So I believe that everybody has a superpower. And so I'm curious what you feel your superpower might be.
Yeah, great question. So I say this actually pretty frequently. I don't think I'm really that great a marketer. I have an affinity for strategy. I've embraced data and analytics and MarTech. I think they're important to stay up on. But I think if there's one skill I have, I actually had it back as an undergrad in my fraternity. I recruited the largest pledge class in the history of my fraternity, and that's kind of emblematic of I think my life as a CMO. To me, I can't be everything. I can't be the greatest pricing analyst and PR person and digital marketer or copywriter or creator, designer. The only thing I think I've really been successful at is identifying, developing, and retaining amazing talent. And a lot of it's predicated on understanding my own weaknesses as a leader and as a person and as a marketer. So, I surround myself with people, and I it's going to sound strange, but I love on them, right? Like I want to help people become their best selves, if you will, their best selves as marketers and people. And that really drives me. So I guess that resonates.
Well, finding and cultivating talent is a huge superpower. It's not, and the reality is that I think as we progress in our careers, particularly up to the CMO level, you may start your career as a specialist in something where you're good at email marketing, or you're good at social media, or good at whatever it is, PR.
Right.
But as you progress in your career, it's really more about managing and developing people. and less about being an expert in anything. And you need to know a little bit about them to be enough to be dangerous. But at the end of the day, you hire experts that are discipline experts in whatever their discipline is.
Absolutely.
And you have to be able to manage them.
Well, you made a really important point about early in your career, like even if you're a sole contributor as a marketing specialist, and I don't think persuasion is the right word, but you recruit people to your ideas, right? And you recruit people to help you achieve your goals. And I think that's one of the things marketing is really dependent on is whether you're a marketing specialist or a CMO, you need help from the legal team and the compliance team and the operations team and the technology team and the finance team. You can't do it on your own. And I think I'll call that part of recruiting as well.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, we're all in sales, whether we realize it or not.
Exactly right.
So I'm curious where you find inspiration for either your team or for yourself.
Yeah, great question. I think there are a lot of lessons in history. I know I've mentioned once before Apollo 13. They had the cards stacked against them, and yet they found a way, right? And there are going to be times in your career where the cards are stacked against you and you have to find a way. So that's inspiring. I find inspiring lessons from military history, from corporate history. So history and historical figures. I don't put anybody on a pedestal, but I'm a student of leadership. And I think I will be until the day I leave this world, because there's always something you can learn from others, and they don't even have to be leaders, right? They can be shipyard workers like Lech Walesa, if you remember Lech Walesa from
he was a labor organizer, right?
Exactly. There's something you can learn from everybody, and so that's where I get my inspiration from. Ordinary people do extraordinary things.
Well, but you also answered both that question and another question with another aspect that may be either a superpower or it may be an inspiration. But I think that I've heard you say multiple times already, just in this conversation, that you enjoy being a student and that you're a lifelong learner and that you're passionate about. I think, if I had to boil it down, it could even be just curiosity, right? As a maybe a superpower, an additional superpower. But a thirst for knowledge and understanding, and so that leads me to the question that I'm curious if there are some values. Curiosity might be one of them, but are there values that you either want to demonstrate to your team, or maybe you would even demand in somebody that you would hire onto your team?
Yeah, great question. So it's interesting. When I started my own company, my partners and I started a company called Vestia Corporation. It was the loyalty company. We had what was called the Circle of Success, the Vestia Circle of Success. It was a pie chart, and it was. I'm going to tie in some of the things I said earlier. The pie was 70% attitude. Good attitude goes a long way in life. 20% was hard work, just being highly productive. And then 10%, I'm going to your point about expectations, and this is going to sound maybe silly and simple, but don't do dumb things. Like you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but think, right? Use your brain. And so, I've had people that, and I won't name the company or name the person, but I had somebody in a large organization I was with send out a direct mail piece without having legal and compliance look at it, and there was something in it that wasn't right, and that was a dumb thing, right?
Yeah,
that person almost lost their job and put the organization at risk, and just think and don't do dumb things, and that's my have a great attitude, work hard, think. Those are my expectations for sure.
That's great. So I'm going to shift gears a little. As you know, we're marketing matchmakers. So that often means we connect brands and marketing agencies, or clients and marketing agencies together. So we don't really live in the world. We're not an agency. We're not on the brand side, but we sort of live in both worlds. I'm curious, just generally, either at national spine and pain centers, or even in a previous life, how do you work with marketing agencies?
You know, it's interesting. You say that because when I talk about identifying, developing, and retaining talent, I don't limit that to people whose paychecks say National Spine and Pain Centers on them.
Right.
I think of the team as anyone that is working towards helping us achieve our mission, whether inside the organization or outside the organization. And so whether it's our PR firm or one of our agencies or you know, an outsourced call center partner, they're all part of the team that we work really hard to identify. And when I say develop, help them understand our culture and what our expectations are, and have open and honest communications with them. And so one, you know, we haven't had the opportunity to work together, but I expect that we will, because I think that selection process is so important. Relative to the agencies we use, there are two primary agencies. I'm gonna take, you know, the call centers and the
That's a different kind of agency.
yeah, all that stuff off the table. I'm even going to take a PR agency off the table. I'm going to talk about just simply marketing agencies. We have two. One is the top of the funnel and one is bottom of the funnel, basically. So the when I look for agencies, I want to find an agency that, you know, and I've worked with the big ones and I've worked with small ones. I tend to favor those that are not the smallest, not contractors or 2 or 3 people, but somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah, and also maybe not a massive holding company, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I've worked with you know, Ogilvy and others, and they're some great people with some BBDO. I could go down the list. But I've worked with some agencies that a lot of people have never even heard of, right? Or at least outside of their cities where they're based. So, you know, I want agencies to push me, right? I want them to push me creatively. I want them to push me in terms of, you know, strategies and tactics. There's, in particular, our performance agency. A lot of what I have learned in the past, say, 7 years about MarTech and digital, I've learned from them. Right. I mean, you know, I've been to conferences and I read, you know, trade publications and websites, but they are very good at technology and data and analytics. They actually have a team of 4 data scientists that frankly are better with our data than our own team is better with our data.
Well, and so that leads me to, I'm just curious, are there certain disciplines of marketing that you feel you would most likely want to get outside perspective? And are there other disciplines that you feel you really should hold close to the vest and should be maybe an internal function rather than outsourcing to an agency?
Yeah. Great question. Again, in the digital marketing realm, some of the technology that is required, I don't want to carry in my budget, right? Like an agency can deploy some of these platforms and distribute the cost among their clients like me, and make it far more cost effective. So you know, anything involved in an expensive executional platform is something I'm going to outsource. In terms of keeping in-house, social media is one of those things that, and frankly, we don't do a lot of it. We do it to stay out there, but we're not investing heavily in social, and so that's something we're doing in-house. You know, interestingly, our model, it's not a large team dedicated to marketing. But we tend to be generalists that are using outside.
Right.
We're like the general contractor. We've got a plumber, an electrician, and you know, a mortar, you know, brick and mortar mason, if you will. You know, and so we outsource quite a bit, and stay generalists internally.
That makes sense. So as marketers, we often work with non-marketing functions within the organization. You mentioned CFO or CEO or other, you know, I'm sure you have maybe a chief medical officer or something in an organization like yours. How do you demonstrate the value of marketing to those that we work with that really aren't marketers?
Right. What a critical question. So I call it, I actually have the domain name, marketing of marketing. There's nothing on the website, but the idea that marketers, sort of like the cobbler, right? The cobbler's kids, need new shoes, right? And you think they shouldn't. As marketers, I don't think we do a very good job of marketing internally who we are and what we do. When I arrived at National Spine and Pain Centers, basically marketing was pretty brochures on a website, right? And when I'm leveraging a team of 4 data scientists and doing the things we do, to your point, it becomes a function of the marketing of marketing, and really what that means is educating others to what's possible. And so essentially, particularly on the performance side, we track every dollar we spend and we know who it's targeted to at the household level, and we can track that all the way into our electronic medical records.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what we've done is simply helping people realize, we're all targets of marketing. In fact, one of the challenges we have as an organization, as a marketing team, is most of our employees never see our marketing efforts because they're not
the
target market, right? Like if you're not, 54 or older, and based on data markers we have, statistically likely to have chronic pain and live within a 10-minute drive time of one of our locations, you're never going to see our ads, because we're not doing billboards, we're not doing Super Bowl ads, and so they're like, well, we need to do more marketing, and people don't realize we're executing tens of millions of marketing impressions, whether it's direct mail or digital or social, every year. And so educating internally is a big part of what we've had to do in the past 3 or 4 years during my tenure, and there's no finish line. Yeah.
So I'm curious if there was a campaign or program either at National Spine and Pain Centers or even at a previous gig that taught you a really valuable lesson, either because it was a miserable failure and you learned something from that, or it was a huge success and it's maybe something you would want to emulate in the future.
Yeah, great question. I think, and I didn't know this until I did it, but when I was at American Family Care, we had made an acquisition of a company called Doctors Express, and it was actually franchised urgent care. And we were going to rebrand the franchise locations from Doctors Express to American Family Care, and the franchisees. And listen, for those who haven't worked in franchising, it is listen, this isn't somebody that couldn't find a job and decided to open up a Subway location. These are some really savvy individuals, often very high net worth, sophisticated people. And they listen, when they ask questions, they're fastballs, right? Like they're very intelligent people, and I have so much respect for franchising and franchisees as a result. But my point is, we were going to rebrand, and one, the amount of effort to get by doing the research and hearing directly from patients what they thought about rebranding, right, was number one. That was probably my best weapon, because when they said, oh, people are going to stop coming to us, and I play the video that says, oh, it doesn't matter to me as long as it's the same doctor and same location and same insurance, that was the importance of internally engaging people before radical change, and getting their input and allaying their fears. And then ultimately, I think the thing that surprised me, we did a good job of getting the voice of the customer. We did a good job of hearing people's concerns and addressing those concerns and being transparent about what we were doing and why we were doing it. The thing that surprised me was that instead of losing business or seeing a dip in business, we actually saw an increase in business. Because you're out there engaging your constituency And again, as long as everything was the same and you had a good reason for the name change. So now Doctors Express is part of the largest network of urgent cares, and these doctors collaborate, and it was a good news story, actually. And so business improved anywhere we did. I've heard Wendy's had the same experience when they changed their format. They basically forced all their franchisees to upgrade their facilities, and the franchisees pushed back until the first few that went saw an increase in business, and then everybody wanted to change, right? As quickly as possible. So I hope that's helpful.
That may be a unique characteristic to franchisees, because while I think many franchise organizations are somewhat resistant to change, they are fast followers. When they see success and they see somebody else that did it well, they always are willing to hear and share best practices from other franchisees. So I think this may be a good lesson for any marketer that works within a franchise organization, to understand that you've got to really, it's a political thing to find some key stakeholders within the franchise organization who you can get on board and make part of the process. Then they can be your both your guinea pigs, but also they're your influencers that get the rest of the franchisees on board with your decisions that you're trying to make.
You just literally read the play out of the playbook we had. We found one franchisee, and we did everything possible to make sure that was going to work. And it did, and it made all the difference in the world. You mentioned something else about franchising that is, I think, applicable outside of franchising for large brands. Granted, in a large multi-state organization like ours, you want consistency as much as possible. But I think one of the interesting things about franchising in particular, and I don't think it has to be franchising. I've seen it done in banking as an example. You mentioned the idea of best practices. A lot of people don't realize, and this was one of my lessons, again, as a student of leadership and a student of marketing. If you think about McDonald's, arguably one of the most successful franchise organizations in the world, in the history of the world, if you think about some of their iconic products, the Big Mac, the Filet-O-Fish, the hot apple pie, all developed and tested on a local level by franchisees. Best practices where the franchisee, the local owner, took a risk, and it became a national sensation. So I think there's a lesson in that for all of us.
Yeah, I love it. All right, I'm going to shift gears and ask some kind of rapid fire questions just for fun that have nothing to do with marketing.
Sounds great.
The first is there a band or a sports team or a movie or a book or a quote that really inspires you?
Oh gosh, yes. You
can pick more than one if there's more than one.
Gosh, so my favorite quote is probably from Calvin Coolidge. It's on persistence. And like I said before, I don't think I'm not the smartest, I'm not the hardest working, but I don't give up, right? When I get punched in the gut, I get back off the ground, and I keep going. And so if you were to Google Calvin Coolidge and persistence, you'd find this really amazing quote about how it's not the smartest, it's not the richest, it's the person who persists. And I think that's true across all endeavors of life, right? Whether it's parenting, you mentioned earlier, which is a challenge, or work, or anything else. In terms of teams and things like that, I love the story. I love almost any story related to an underdog. So whether it's the British defeat of the Spanish Armada, whether it's literally David and Goliath, whether it's the 1969 Jets, Joe Namath beating Johnny Unitas and the Colts, the 1980 U.S. hockey team during the Olympics, you can go right down the list. And again, it goes to being a student of leadership and competition. And I actually, have a book in my head around how under-resourced organizations can defeat superior forces. And it's not a unique idea, but there are a lot of lessons to learn from underdogs that we can apply. Even if you're not an underdog, there are a lot of lessons,
Yeah.
So
Well, even the Jedi can defeat the evil empire. The ragtag team of Jedi Knights can beat the.
Exactly, exactly.
So I'm curious, other than your family, where do you find joy outside of work? Do you have any hobbies or anything like that? Or
So my family and I love traveling. And when I say traveling, it's not like going on vacation. We go to some pretty unique places, and usually for extended periods of time. So we went and lived in Chile for a month. Lived in an apartment, went to the grocery store, went to the dentist, and lived in Chile for a month.
Oh.
And that was a great experience. We've been to Cuba on a cultural visit. That was exciting. Been to India, lots of really interesting places. So from relative to my family life, that's something we're passionate about. Again, because you learn, right? You learn from other cultures and other people, and you learn that we're, at the end of the day, we're all really very similar, regardless of what we eat at the dinner table or what language we speak or what currencies in our wallet. Human nature is human nature around the world. So that's number one. Number two, I'd say, professionally, but outside of work, I teach a marketing leadership class, and to me, really, that's an outlet to pay back or pay forward, if you will, all the people that have helped me. So for whatever reason, people saw things in me that caused them to invest. Maybe it was pity, I don't know. But there are people that have helped me in my career, in my life, that I have no way of ever repaying. And so I hope to just pay them back by doing things for others, and in particular, the next generation of marketing leaders. There are a lot of things I've learned, sometimes doing it the right way, like rebranding, and sometimes doing it the wrong way. Particularly early in my career, not getting enough internal consensus, particularly by people in the field and operations. I would just, I'd have an idea and I'd just, plow ahead. And to the degree that I can help others realize that's not the way to do it, then I feel like I've made a contribution.
I love that. All right. So my last question for you is is there a brand that you've never worked on that you really admire? And what is it about that brand that you admire?
It's actually a pretty easy one, and you probably hear it all the time, but I've become a student of Chick-fil-A. And interestingly, I'm going to tie a couple of thoughts. So as I mentioned, I'm charged with culture at our organization. And, I was the crazy heretic that said we ought to do an employee survey. When HR thought that was a bad idea, I was pounding my fist on the table saying, we these are our internal customers. We need to, understand what they need as employees. So I have culture, and back to this idea, there's a really great article I recommend people read. It's called The Service Profit Chain. It's by several Harvard professors. Heskett is the lead professor. Schlesinger's Heskett, Jones, Schlesinger are the first three of the five authors. The Service Profit Chain, and it basically says what I said earlier. The model is, if you treat your employees well, they will treat your customers well. And what I didn't say later is, and then you will make a lot of money.
Right.
So
they usually leave out that last part.
Yeah. So Chick-fil-A is so amazing in that regard. And the way they engineered their culture. Now, granted, they had the I'll call it the luxury of having a CEO, founder, single shareholder, right?
You're right. Not having to answer to a board of directors or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not taking anything away. It was that particular situation, but you could screw that up too, right? Like he did a great job. Yeah. And so actually, I have hired the former head of leadership development from Chick-fil-A, the guy that basically developed all their leadership development and training for 22 years. I'm now working with him. I didn't hire him as an employee. I have hired him as an outside resource to help us develop our leadership development program and help us, evolve our culture. And so I guess, Chick-fil-A is that brand, and they do it. It's not just that they say my pleasure, right? It's so much more than that. It's an integrated system of everything they do. And interestingly, I was speaking with someone that happens to be a board member of Chick-fil-A, not the person from leadership development, but a board member who's actually a member of the Cathy family. And he said, it's actually not the customer service piece that makes what they do so remarkable, but it's the operations piece.
Yeah, right.
If you can get 200 cars through the drive-through in an hour, I mean, just think about that, right? Yeah. And if 70% of those orders are customized, right? Like, I don't want pickles, right? Like, I want light ice, right? Like, I mean, there are so many permutations of every single meal, and you're getting 200 cars to the drive-through in an hour. It's a remarkable feat operationally. So the brand consistency, the brand is consistent with their operational capabilities, and it's just remarkable. It's remarkable.
It is. Well, it is impressive, and being based here in Atlanta, we're fortunate to have been exposed to that, to understand the value of that culture and the value of the operational excellence and all of that. Where somebody that doesn't live in this market might be less aware of all of those things. And obviously, as a brand, they've had their ups and downs in terms of controversy and things like that.
Sure.
But at their core, when it comes to service, when it comes to operational excellence, there's really no, and just remember, this is a fast food restaurant at its core. It's not a, we're not talking about Saks Fifth Avenue or a really luxury high-end company or Apple Computers or somebody, this is a fast food restaurant that sells fried chicken sandwiches.
Right.
So yeah, it's pretty impressive. So anyway, Bill, this has been an amazing conversation. So Bill Koleszar is the Chief Marketing Officer for the National Spine and Pain Center. I have enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much, Bill.
Oh, Joe, thanks for having me. And I've watched several of these, and keep them going, because again, we can learn something from everyone. And this is a great venue, a great platform to facilitate that. So thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill.